Welcome to Berries in the Interim podcast, where we explore the cutting edge of innovative clinical trial design for the pharmaceutical and medical industries, and so much more. Let's dive in.
All right, welcome everybody to In the Interim, Berry Consultants podcast about all things science, statistical, and clinical trial and medical sciences. I have a really cool guest today. Mike Krams is our guest today, and for everybody's knowledge, he joined Berry Consultants in January, but Mike has a really interesting history in clinical trials, drug development. He's been 30 years at multiple pharmaceutical companies. He's led quantitative sciences departments at these. He's done innovation everywhere he's been, and now we're thrilled to have him at Berry, but we talk about innovation. How do we do innovation in drug development? So, Mike, welcome to In the Interim.
Hi, Scott. And hey, you forgot to mention how it all works. You write a letter to Professor Don Berry 25 years ago and think there'll never be a response, but then there was a response, and the rest is history.
So this is a great source. We are celebrating Berry Consultants' 25th anniversary this year. We're marketing this, and you can see this everywhere. But we've been working with Mike Krams for well over 25 years. So I'd love to hear a little bit about, and I know much of this, but tell us about the ASTIN Stroke Trial, which was your first interaction with Don Berry.
Yes. I was trained as a neurologist and a stroke neurologist. We worked on one of the first stroke units in Germany before I went to London to do functional brain imaging. And in that functional brain imaging environment, I learned a lot about being clever on how to detect a weak signal in functional MRI and PET studies, a weak signal in a noisy environment. I learned a lot of statistics. And then I joined a pharmaceutical R&D organization. They were looking for a stroke neurologist with a background in functional brain imaging, interested in developing acute ischemic neuroprotectants for stroke. And so I was made for the job. And then I looked at what was already happening in that area. And there were plenty of efforts to create new treatments for acute ischemic stroke patients. And one failed after the other. And when I started in my career in Pharm R&D, I just came from the Institute of Neurology Functional Brain Imaging Unit. The sophistication of the functional brain imaging experimental design and analysis world contrasted with a world in those days where you spent millions of dollars into having two groups and doing a t-test at the end. And it was just mind-boggling. And it also was pretty clear that identifying the correct dose and treatment regimen was a big, big issue when people went from phase 2 to phase 3. And so I tried to figure out, if that's the problem, if we are not very good in learning about the correct dose and treatment regimen to take into confirmatory trials, what needs to change? And that's
so let's set this up a little bit.
Yes.
So you've got a potential neuroprotectant for acute stroke.
Yeah.
You go to a traditional trial design. Invariably, your statistician is going to say 3 doses, 80 patients a dose.
Maybe more
maybe
patients.
2.
Yeah. But yes, it's like 2 or 3 active treatment arms and a control, and pairwise comparisons, and that's it. Yep. And just mind-boggling how one can do that and not think about alternatives. And so I started educating myself about what else one could do, and I came about these. There were a number of papers that were really well written, and the author was this professor whom I imagined with a long beard and probably would never talk to me. And the name was Professor Don Berry. Anyhow, I eventually found the courage to write him a letter and say, hey, I'm really very impressed with your papers. There's this one paper about Bayesian thinking in clinical research, and it totally resonates with me because as a medic, that's how I function. What you describe as the Bayesian thinking, that's how you work in medicine. And so, hey, can we meet and can you perhaps discuss with us what one could do to approach this problem, namely identifying the correct dose in a different manner? And so that's how it all started.
Yeah.
And then, we had just an amazing time exploring the opportunity space of what could be done with fantastic colleagues in the team, and Don, of course, and others, Peter Muller and many others, Andy Grieve, key person. Over many months, we were able to effectively, in those days, not exactly invent, but really apply for one of the first times simulation-guided clinical trial design. And that the explanation that we gave to our senior managers was, look, the way we currently work is we build an airport, we then build a plane, we put passengers on a plane that's never been flown before. As the plane is traveling, we build another airport where it'll land, and then it'll land, and by that time we'll have destroyed the airport from where we started. And then we do this over and over again. Yeah. And that's how we do clinical research. How can we do things differently? And, with Don's help and Andy Reeves' help and other people's help, we eventually came up with a design that's published and well presented, where we had, believe it or not, 16 different treatment arms and what is called a response adaptive allocation to treatments responding to the data on stroke scores coming in real time. So that's how it started.
Yeah, that's all. And interestingly, that the time it took to do those simulations and build this is a time where software's not available, you're custom coding. This is many months to carry out these simulations.
Exactly.
But even today, that trial, 16 doses, response adaptive randomization. Yeah. The result of that trial, which has been published, was a resounding success in that it demonstrated clearly the drug didn't work.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. And it did so, there was a futility rule built in, and so it stopped early for futility. And so the design did what it was supposed to do, yes. Yeah. But you mentioned the time that it took in those days to fine-tune the software that was handmade, custom built really to support this. And we were always angry when we had to wait another 2 or 3 weeks before the next iteration of software came in. Compare this to today, where you have, software packages like Facts or others, where on a push of a button, you can plug in stuff and immediately get a first sense of how things work. So, but that's how it started.
Yeah. So we now have software that can do those simulations, can build trials like that. But in doing that, the hard part may not have been the simulations. The hard part may not have been the modeling, the response adaptive randomization. It helps when you have Peter Muller, brilliant scientist, doing all of that. Yep. So I want to talk a little bit about bringing change.
Yep.
You go into a place where it's typically fixed trial designs, enroll this and come back and show me the data in 3 years.
Yep.
Now you're doing interims, monthly, weekly, response adaptive randomization. How do you bring change to this industry? Is it, so that's what I'd like to talk about.
Sure. Sure. And let's just talk in general terms rather than about one particular trial in one particular pharma R&D environment, because the general aspects hold true really wherever you look. Overall, our industry is extremely conservative, and people haven't got a lot of encouragement to think out of the box and try things that might perhaps require additional interactions with health authorities, regulatory scientists, etc. So the going in position is everybody is doing what was done before and is not that comfortable proposing quite different approaches. And the question, of course, is why do something different if what we are already doing is working? But it's not working. It's so inefficient. And so you're asking how to bring about change. Well, if you are in an environment that is utterly against it, and from a top-down perspective, senior management will not allow you to explore innovative approaches, it's very tough. So if you want to do this bottom up and you haven't got a champion in a more senior position, it's my experience tells me I've been most successful in places where my boss and the boss of my boss were champions for the idea that we brought forward. So it's important to have champions right in senior positions to help you achieve this. But then what's equally important is to clearly articulate the value proposition. You don't do innovation for innovation's sake. But if there is a way of convincing the environment that we work in that there is a better decision to be made at an earlier time point in a more efficient manner, now we're talking. And being able to articulate clearly, understanding the position of the person at the other side of the table and bringing along the audience, that's key. Let me give you some anecdotes.
So can I talk about? I think this is so critical. So, you've got experience of this, in development programs, much more top level than I. So I end up working a lot with teams, and we explore adaptive designs in all of this. And even at that level, you've got to create a champion that's going to go up. Yep. And fight for it. First of all, you've got to demonstrate to that person that what you're doing is better. Yep. They've got to believe in it. Yep. But I've also found that you need that a little bit that person has ownership in what you've created.
Oh, absolutely.
So that when we're doing these, and so the consultant, we don't go in and say, you've got to do X, and we're kind of beating them down. They're not a champion for you. They don't necessarily believe in it. They're not going to go and fight for this. But if you get them to believe what you're doing better, they made the decisions. You guided them, and you showed them the ramifications. That's why clinical trial simulation is beautiful, by the way. You can see the ramifications of all that. They become the champion. They can go up and say, here's why, and if they're fighting for it, they're champion at that level. And then what happens above that?
Yeah. Well, you made it so clear that it can't be that an external party comes and says, this is the way it's done. Drug development is a team sport. And the way I've experienced this with Don and you and others has been that you've empowered us to stand up with a proposal that you helped develop, but you really empower the team on point within the pharma R&D organization to then carry the flag and make the points. And what happens? So you need to think about who are the key decision makers. Initially, in compound development teams, you have a team leader. You have a program or project manager. You have a therapeutic area head. You have functional heads. Lots of people have a say in this. And often what happens is that even though you may have been successful in bringing your own team around to embracing an innovative idea, it's enough if just one person somewhere higher up says, hey, I don't like this. This has never been seen before. I don't think this will fly. That's enough to derail it. And then it's important not to give up, but to try to understand what is the motivation of that person to say, hey, it won't work. Give you an example. When we implemented response adaptive dose finding studies in a broader way, one of the arguments that we made were it's of value to have more doses rather than less doses. And the person who headed up the pharmaceutical sciences organization at the time, they would have ultimately been accountable for making more dose strengths and enabling that whole many doses rather than a few. They hated this. They absolutely hated it. And then, within Learn trials, we proposed something that proved really an amazing thing. We invited the head of the pharmaceutical sciences organization to be a silent observer in the data monitoring committee. So that person was now able to see firsthand how the information evolved over time and was sworn to secrecy, obviously. But in the back of their minds, they were clear on how the trajectory of a particular program was more likely to go. And of course, that might have implications on bigger strategic thinking and some key decisions that might have been in that person's mind. So to understand where the resistance comes from, taking that very seriously, but then also finding an opportunity to bring that person into a position where that person can also support and champion what we're doing. And that function ultimately became a big supporter for us because they understood that we were more frequently stopping things that shouldn't go forward and bringing forward things that should go forward more rapidly.
Yeah. So a little bit, so the title of this, we've titled this The Art and Slog of Innovation. And so a little bit of that seems like the slog. That invariably when you're doing something different, that there's ways this has been done many times within a pharmaceutical company, within the industry, and there's a lot of copycat doing what the last person did and all that. And now you're proposing something different. Mm-hmm. And invariably 10 people are going to give a reason not to, as this goes from concept and development. And all of these will stop it if you're not able to combat that with information and bring those people along as well, that you're not an enemy, that we're making better decisions. That's a bit of the slog of this innovation aspect of it, from it, that it's just so hard to do it.
Well, it's actually hard work. And you need to be at the table where strategic decisions are made. If you're not there, if you're not present, doing this from a distance with only punctual interactions is much more difficult. So being embedded in discussions that lead to better problem solving, that lead to creating resource efficiencies, and ultimately that lead to creating a new fun intellectual culture. That's a key thing. Is incredibly rewarding, but you have to be part of the inner discussion where the strategic direction is being set. That's why it's so important not just to look at an individual trial in isolation, but at the development strategy overall, and then think within that bigger picture, how do we design the strategy?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So part of this is, you hear this, you need to be at the table. The question is, how do you get to the table?
Yep.
You can't just blurt out, I need to be at the table. That generally doesn't work. And in our circumstances as a statistician, we may have a number of statisticians joining this, we have scenarios where a client may say, can you show us the power? Can you show us this, this, and this? How you present this is so critical. And if you pass this to somebody else who then brings it up there, and they present it differently, they answer questions differently. And it's so much the ability to see how people react to this. Yes. And what do they need to see? Is it about time? Is it about cost?
Yes.
Is it about another development program that they want to take these additional shots?
Yes.
So being able to listen and hear all of this and then be able to present exactly what's going to help them make that decision is the really hard part about this. And it's earning your way at the table, that people think you help them and you're presenting the right thing and you understand the bigger part. That's what's harder for us as statisticians. We're really good at calculating something, but this is the hard part, to earn your way to the table.
True. respect is earned, but I tell you, I have had the privilege to work with so many statistical experts and modeling experts and mathematicians who are absolutely brilliant in articulating clearly in a way that the other function that might not be mathematically inclined still understands. And that is a necessary condition for getting the implementation of innovation guaranteed. So very good communication skills, but as you pointed out, also very good listening skills and psychological skills. Where does the other party come from? But, there is also a need for putting your foot down and making sure that others understand what statistical experts do is a contribution to strategic thinking. It's not just a subservient number crunching activity in the background. Absolutely not. And so insisting that there be that partnership between clinical experts, translational science experts, regulators, and statistical and others experts, is very important.
So one of my words I associate with you, and you say this all the time, is imagine. So let me imagine if we could do the following. So we started this off with 1990s, a neuroprotectant for acute stroke. Yeah. We are now 2025. We have no neuroprotectant for acute stroke. Yeah. We have thrombolytics. We have endovascular therapy that, by the way, is incredibly effective in some patients. We're still in search for neuroprotectant in stroke. Imagine if development would have been different. Are there neuroprotectants that we missed, that we didn't take shots on goals? We got the wrong dose. Mm-hmm. Now, we as an industry, we're developing really cool things. Mm-hmm. They're out there, but this is a really hard area where in some ways we haven't made tremendous progress.
Yes.
And does the development affect that?
Yes. So, this is so close to my heart, but it's not just in acute ischemic stroke. It's in any important disease where there aren't solutions. You gave a talk once about statistics and baseball, and it inspired me. And in it was the notion of the time machine, to be able to compare a thing that happened in the past and move seamlessly to the present and build models around that. And then I heard your dad, Don Berry, talk about platform trials. And, I've worked in different companies on individual projects, observing what the competition did. And it really, at times, drove me nuts how mistakes were reinvented without comparing notes and working together. Now, imagine that at the center of the universe was not an individual investigational compound, but the need of the patient. And imagine that everybody was very keen to get to the right solution at the earliest time point. Of course, one would think about how to bring things together. And what I love to imagine are these integrated research platforms, where on one hand, on an ongoing basis, you captivate all learnings on how to observe patients in methodology-like studies, but then you build on top of that the exploration of new pharmacological entities, a little bit as is done in platform trials such as I-SPY 2 or the many others that have been developed by you guys. And so I feel that is the future. And there are some questions on how to achieve that, but hey, that's where we need to go.
Yeah, and I have to put in a plug for the STEP platform trial, NIH funded, NINDS funded, that's trying to do exactly this, not rebuilding the airport every time. So this is a fantastic effort, and we're seeing much more of this in platform trials. So, but I'll come back to the sports things, and I interpret things in sports. I go back to this. And a lot of this is very similar. So baseball for years, nobody would do anything different. The manager, if you did what everybody else did and the team lost, it was the player's fault. if you do something innovative and you lose, it's your fault.
Yeah.
If you did something against the grain and all that. And it's the same in drug development. If you do what everybody else did, it's the drug's fault.
Yeah.
But if you do something innovative, maybe it was my fault. Maybe I did it wrong and all that. The fascinating thing, of course, in baseball is analytics has completely changed the game.
Yeah.
And in 15 years, the way the game is played, the way it's set up, is entirely different.
Yeah.
So innovation completely changed it, but it's also done that in drug development.
Yeah.
Platform trials, adaptive designs in 15 years. Now, if you don't do these things, maybe they'll say, why weren't you doing that? Why were you doing that? And maybe it's a similar thing.
You're absolutely right. We've come a very long way. What is so amazing, and that is something that statistical experts can take a lead in, is the power of simulations to be used as a tool to bringing people around the table and then playing ping pong with arguments and saying, hey, what if? And then you try that out. And I think there's a lot of openness to innovate. I want to say this also with experts in regulatory science. A lot of people say, oh, regulators don't like it. It's absolutely not my experience. My experience that there have been so incredible interactions with health authorities that have helped shape on how to go about innovating.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And people don't see 10 trials done like this. It's not because agencies said you can't do that.
Yep.
They're not being brought that. So I think regulators have played a huge part, actually, in a lot of the innovations that's happened in this. Yep.
Yep.
But that's part of it, again, the slog part of it. That when you present this, well, regulators aren't going to like this. Well, drug supply is not going to like this. Well, CRO is not going to like this. And that's a bit of the slog of and the hard work in doing something different.
Yeah. There's this saying, culture eats strategy for lunch. But if you make it a culture to have fun because you are intellectually challenging each other, and it's not innovation for innovation's sake, but it's simply the question, what's the best thing in the name of future patients? Then everything else will follow.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, boy, this has been wonderful. I'm incredibly excited as we move forward and part of Berry Consultants, but it's an incredible look at innovation, the art, and the slog. Appreciate it very much, Mike.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.